There's a specific kind of silence that settles over the low country of South Carolina. It's heavy. It's thick with the scent of salt marsh and old cypress. It's a silence that has protected secrets for generations. In this corner of the world, the past isn't dead. It isn't even past. For nearly a century, that silence belonged to one family. If you lived in the 5 counties surrounding Hampton, South Carolina, you knew their name before you knew the name of the president, Murdaugh. For 86 years, 3 generations of Murdaugh men served as the elected solicitor, the chief prosecutor, for the 14th Judicial Circuit. They didn't just practice the law, they were the law. They were prosecutors by day, personal injury lawyers by night. They controlled who was charged and who was paid. They were respected. They were feared. They were, in essence, kings of their small southern kingdom. But power, like any foundation, can crumble. And on the night of June 7, 2021, that crumbling dynasty made a sound that even the Lowcountry silence couldn't drown out. The property was called Moselle, 1,700 acres of prime hunting land stretching across the border of Hampton and Colleton counties. It was a playground for the wealthy and connected, a place of private dove shoots and wild boar hunts, a symbol of the Murdaugh family's prosperity. At 10:07 p.m. on June 7th, a frantic call was placed to 911. The caller was Richard Alexander Alex Murdaugh, a 4th-generation lawyer and scion of the legal dynasty. He had returned, he claimed, from visiting his ailing mother and found his family slaughtered. Maggie Murdaugh, 52, was a staple of the local community, known for her warm, albeit socialite presence. Paul Murdaugh, 22, was the youngest son, a junior at the University of South Carolina and a fixture on the family's estate. When first responders arrived, they didn't just find bodies. They found a crime scene that looked more like an assassination than a burglary gone wrong. Maggie had been executed near the family's dog kennels, shot multiple times with a high-powered rifle, the kind of weapon used for hunting. Paul had been ambushed nearby, hit twice by devastating blasts from a shotgun. The brutality was stark. The violence was personal. Yet, in the immediate aftermath, a curious narrative began to take hold. Alex Murdaugh, a grieving husband and father, was treated less like a primary subject and more like a victim of a terrible, isolated tragedy. In a region where the name Murdaugh commanded instant authority, the investigation seemed slower, more deliberate. The due process wasn't just extended, it seemed paralyzing. For weeks, then months, no arrests were made. The official word was, there is no danger to the public. But the public knew better. A war had started, and this was just the first bloody volley. To understand the silence of the Low Country and the murders at Moselle, we have to talk about a fog-shrouded night 2 years earlier, in February 2019. This is where the invincibility of the Murdaugh name first started to crack. A group of wealthy, connected college kids had been partying and drinking on the Murdaughs' boat. At around 2 a.m., speeding through the narrow, disorienting waterways near the Archers Creek Bridge, the boat crashed violently into a bridge piling. 5 people were thrown. 1 was missing, 19-year-old Mallory Beach. When police arrived, the focus immediately shifted. It wasn't just on rescue, it was on damage control. The alleged driver of the boat, dynamic and visibly intoxicated, was Paul Murdaugh. Hospital staff later reported that Alex Murdaugh and his father, Randolph III, the reigning solicitor, arrived quickly. They allegedly tried to block police interviews. Witnesses claimed Alex actively tried to confuse the story about who was driving, planting the idea that Paul was just a passenger. But Mallory Beach's body was found 8 days later. Her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a handshake at the solicitor's office. This lawsuit demanded what powerful dynasties fear most: transparency, discovery, financial audits. By June 2021, the 2019 boat crash case was at a tipping point. Just 3 days after Maggie and Paul were murdered, Alex Murdaugh was scheduled to face a mandatory hearing that would force him to reveal his personal and firm finances. The Murdaugh kingdom, long built on hidden ledgers and unspoken favors, was on the verge of being exposed in a very public court. This wasn't a tragedy that struck from nowhere. It was a tsunami built by decades of arrogance colliding with the undeniable consequence of a family that had forgotten how to follow the rules they were supposed to uphold. In the wake of the murders, with no answers and only the echo of Alex's 911 call, the Lowcountry became a crucible of rumor and suspicion. It was a murder mystery that didn't feel contained. It opened a vault of older, stranger secrets. If you lived in Hampton, you began to reread the deaths associated with the Murdaugh family with new, suspicious eyes. There was Stephen Smith, 19 years old, found dead in the middle of a country road miles from his stalled car. Police initially ruled it a hit and run, despite a shocking lack of physical evidence on the road or his body. Rumors in the community, documented in investigative files, insisted his death was linked to the Murdaughs, specifically the older son Buster, and that the original investigation was deliberately botched to protect them. The case was cold until June 2021. Days after Maggie and Paul were murdered, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, reopened the investigation into Stephen's death, saying they uncovered evidence that came to light during the Murdaugh murder investigation. What was that evidence? SLED wouldn't say, but the silence had been broken. Then there was Gloria Satterfield. For 20 years, she was the Murdaugh family housekeeper. She was part of the fabric of their lives. In 2018, she supposedly tripped and fell down the stairs at the family's other estate. She later died from her injuries. Alex Murdaugh, ever the helpful lawyer, steered her surviving family toward an attorney to file an insurance claim against himself. They did. The insurance companies paid out $4.3 million for Gloria's death. But not a single dime of that money went to Gloria Satterfield's sons. Millions vanished into a shell company controlled by Alex. It was an insurance payout without a payment, a payout for a death that suddenly looked a lot more profitable than tragic. This was the context. This wasn't just a husband who found his wife and son dead. This was the collapsing center of a complex criminal empire. The list of people with a motive to hurt the Murdaughs was long: grieving families, jilted business partners, anyone aware of their decades-long game of financial shell games. But only one person seemed to be standing precisely at the nexus where all these tragedies converged. Only one person had his entire life's work, his finances, and his reputation scheduled to be shredded in court just days after the murders. The grieving husband, the powerful father, Alex Murdaugh.